From the dust of the first agricultural settlements to the gleaming bronze of the first empires, the story of human civilization has been written as a slow, linear march of progress. It's a familiar tale, taught in our schools and etched into our collective consciousness. A story of our primitive ancestors gradually discovering fire, inventing the wheel, and building, stone by painstaking stone, the foundations of the modern world. It is a neat, orderly progression that seems to explain everything. A comforting narrative that accounts for our journey from the cave to the cosmos. But what if this story is incomplete? What if, scattered across the deserts, hidden in the deepest jungles and submerged beneath the waves, there is evidence of another story? Whispers from a forgotten age, anomalies that refuse to fit into the clean timeline of our history books. All around the world, there are silent monuments of impossible scale, built with a precision that defies their supposed technological era. In the rolling plains of southeastern Anatolia, a land cradled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, lies a place known to history as the Fertile Crescent. This is the land where civilization was supposedly born, where humanity first laid down its spears, planted seeds in the earth, and built the villages that would one day swell into the world's first cities. The story is a familiar one, taught in every classroom. A neat, linear progression from simple to complex. First agriculture, then settlement, then society, and only then, after thousands of years of slow, steady progress, came the capacity for monumental architecture and the grand expression of religion. It is a comfortable story, a logical one. And for over a century, a quiet, unassuming hill in this very landscape seemed to stand as a silent witness to this story. The locals called it Göbekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill. For generations, it was considered little more than a natural feature of the land, perhaps a medieval Byzantine cemetery at the oldest. Farmers would plow its slopes, their tools occasionally striking against buried slabs of limestone, which they would move aside and discard, unaware that they were disturbing the sleep of a forgotten world. But in 1994, an archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt came to Potbelly Hill. He looked at the same discarded stones, the same gentle mound rising from the plains, but he saw something different. He saw not the work of medieval hands, but the faint, almost imperceptible signature of the Stone Age. He recognized the fragments not as simple grave markers, but as pieces of something far older and far more significant. Schmidt secured permission to dig, and what his team began to uncover in the years that followed would not just add a new chapter to our history. It would force us to tear out the first pages and begin the story of humanity anew. Because buried beneath that quiet hill was not a cemetery, it was a temple, or rather, a vast and sophisticated complex of temples, a breathtaking collection of stone circles built not with rough, unworked boulders, but with dozens of massive T-shaped pillars of limestone, each weighing between 10 and 20 tons. They were arranged in elegant concentric rings, quarried from a nearby plateau, moved over a quarter of a mile, and erected with a precision that is difficult to comprehend. And they were ancient. Carbon dating placed their construction at roughly 9600 BCE. Let that date settle in your mind. This is not 9600 years ago. This is nearly 12,000 years ago. This is a time 6 millennia before the construction of Stonehenge. 7 millennia before the first pyramids of Giza pierced the Egyptian sky. This complex was built at the very end of an ice age, when much of the world was still covered in glaciers. And the pillars were not blank. They were covered, alive with a menagerie of exquisitely carved reliefs, a procession of animals from a world we can barely imagine. Snarling foxes, charging boars, venomous snakes and scorpions, and most hauntingly, vultures, with their wings outstretched in a silent, eternal watch. The T-shaped pillars themselves are starkly anthropomorphic, with long, slender arms and hands carved along their sides, their fingers pointing towards their fronts. They are not mere pillars. They are stylized representations of powerful beings gathered in a silent assembly, their featureless heads staring into the center of their sacred circles. This was not a humble shrine. This was a cathedral of the Stone Age, an architectural and artistic masterpiece from a time when humanity was supposed to be living in caves. The established timeline of human development is built on a simple foundational premise. First comes the grain, then comes the gods. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, allowed humans to abandon a nomadic, hunter-gatherer lifestyle. A stable food supply led to permanent villages. Villages grew into towns, allowing for specialization of labor, the development of social hierarchies, and the accumulation of resources. It was only from this stable, civilized platform that society could afford the time, the manpower, and the shared ideology to construct massive public works like temples. Religion and its grand monuments were seen as a product of settled agricultural life. According to this model, the people who lived in southeastern Anatolia 12,000 years ago were small, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. They had no writing, no pottery, no metal tools. They had not yet domesticated animals or cultivated crops. They were, according to the standard model, utterly incapable of conceiving, let alone executing, a project on the scale of Göbekli Tepe. And so, the mainstream archaeological consensus has had to stretch and contort itself to fit this impossible discovery into the existing framework. The official explanation is that these were not ordinary hunter-gatherers, but uniquely complex ones. Perhaps, the theory goes, the abundance of wild game and cereals in the region allowed them to live in semi-permanent camps. From these camps, different tribes and clans would converge on Potbelly Hill for seasonal rituals, feasting, and the collaborative effort of building their sacred spaces. It was a meeting point, a ritualistic center for a people on the very cusp of civilization. After their work was done, they would disperse, returning to their nomadic ways. In this view, Göbekli Tepe is the exception that proves the rule, the last spectacular gasp of hunter-gatherer culture before the dawn of agriculture. But the closer we look at the stones of Göbekli Tepe, the more this neat explanation begins to crumble into dust. The anomalies are not small details. They are fundamental contradictions that challenge the very logic of the mainstream view. First, there is the question of logistics. The sheer scale of the project is staggering. Archaeologists estimate that only about 5% of the site has been excavated, with ground-penetrating radar suggesting at least 15 more similar and possibly larger enclosures remain buried. Constructing just one of these enclosures would require a highly coordinated workforce of hundreds of people, laboring for decades, if not centuries. How did scattered nomadic bands organize such a sustained effort? How did they communicate a unified architectural and symbolic plan across generations? And more pressingly, how did they feed this army of builders? Hunting and gathering is a full-time, precarious existence. it does not generate the kind of massive food surplus needed to support a non-productive class of architects, engineers, and masons for any significant length of time. The very existence of Göbekli Tepe implies a level of social organization and resource management that is the hallmark of an agricultural society, the very society it supposedly predates by 1,000 years. The stones themselves are a silent argument that our timeline is wrong. Then there is the mystery of the technology. The limestone pillars, some standing over 18 feet tall, were hewn from solid bedrock in a nearby quarry using nothing more than flint and stone tools. Imagine the effort, the sheer, brutal persistence required, but it is the artistry that truly baffles. The animal reliefs are not crude etchings, they are high-relief carvings executed with a confidence and stylistic flair that speaks of a long-established artistic tradition. Where are the earlier, cruder examples of this art? They haven't been found. It seems to appear at Göbekli Tepe, fully formed, as if out of nowhere. And among the carvings are symbols that hint at a knowledge far beyond what we would expect. Researchers studying Pillar 43, known as the Vulture Stone, have argued that the arrangement of animals is not random, but is in fact a sophisticated astronomical chart, a star map. They propose that the animals represent constellations and that the pillar is a date stamp, marking a specific moment in time, the catastrophic comet impact event that many scientists believe triggered the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe around 10,950 BCE. Is it possible these primitive hunters were also sophisticated astronomers recording a cataclysm that reshaped their world? But the final and perhaps most profound mystery is what happened to Göbekli Tepe. Around 8000 BCE, after nearly 2 millennia of use, the site was not simply
abandoned to the winds. It was deliberately and painstakingly buried. Its creators brought in millions of cubic feet of soil, rock, and animal bones, and carefully, ritually, entombed their own magnificent creation. They erased it from the landscape, preserving it perfectly in a time capsule of their own making. Why? Why would a culture spend centuries building the world's first cathedral only to hide it from the world? It is an act that defies easy explanation. It was not an act of destruction, but one of careful preservation, or perhaps of concealment. Faced with these deep, unsettling questions, new theories have emerged. Theories that ask us to look at the puzzle from a completely different angle. The site's discoverer, Klaus Schmidt, championed a revolutionary idea. He inverted the old axiom. What if it wasn't first the grain, then the gods? What if it was the other way around? Perhaps the intense, shared desire to construct this sacred place, this cathedral on a hill, was the very catalyst that sparked the Neolithic Revolution. The immense logistical challenge of feeding the builders may have been the primary motivation for the invention of agriculture. The need for a stable, year-round workforce may have been the reason for the first permanent settlements. In this view, it was the pull of the heavens, the call of the sacred, the idea of Göbekli Tepe that literally created the civilized world we know today. Religion was not the product of society, it was the engine. Other researchers take this even further. Following the clues on the Vulture Stone, they see Göbekli Tepe not as the beginning of our story, but as the end of another. Perhaps it was built by the survivors of the Younger Dryas cataclysm, a traumatized people who had witnessed the heavens fall and the world change in an instant. In this light, the temple complex becomes a monumental effort to understand and placate the terrifying powers of the cosmos. The pillars become celestial markers, an observatory designed to ensure that such a disaster would never again catch humanity unaware. It was a memorial to a drowned world and a warning for the future. This leads to the most speculative and perhaps the most compelling theory of all. What if the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not hunter-gatherers at all? What if they were not starting from scratch, but instead were the inheritors of a lost legacy? Could they have been the last remnants of a much older, more advanced civilization, one that was all but wiped from the face of the earth by the Younger Dryas event? This would explain the sudden appearance of sophisticated astronomy, engineering, and symbolic art. It would explain how they organized such a monumental undertaking. Göbekli Tepe, in this view, was not the birth of a new world, but a desperate attempt to preserve the knowledge of an old one. A final, magnificent echo of a forgotten golden age.
The silent, watching figures of Göbekli Tepe leave us with a profound and unsettling paradox. A structure too complex for its time, and artistry too refined for its supposed creators. A knowledge of the cosmos that seems utterly out of place. It is a historical impossibility, standing defiantly on the Turkish plains, forcing us to confront the idea that the story of our past is far from complete. The careful, deliberate burial of the site remains its most haunting secret. Why would they hide their masterpiece? Was it a final sacred act to protect it from a changing world, preserving its message for a distant future that might be able to understand it? Or were they sealing something away, a memory, a power, a truth so profound that they believed it had to be removed from the memory of humankind? The question of why our ancestors built such a place is one that may forever echo among its stone pillars, but it is haunted by an even more pragmatic and perhaps more disturbing question. How did they do it? The mastery of stone seen at Göbekli Tepe is not an isolated event. It is a theme we see repeated across the ancient world, a thread of impossible engineering that seems to connect the most enigmatic sites on Earth. And in another time and another land, a different culture would take this very same mastery and elevate it to a level that seems to defy the laws of physics themselves. The story begins in the cerulean depths of the Mediterranean, off the coast of a small, windswept Greek island called Antikythera. The year is 1900. A team of sponge divers, taking shelter from a violent storm, stumbles upon the ghostly silhouette of a Roman-era shipwreck, a vessel that met its end 2,000 years ago. From its watery grave, they salvage a treasure trove of ancient artifacts, marble statues, fine pottery, and glassware. Among them, a find that was initially overlooked, a calcified, corroded lump of bronze, mistaken for little more than a rock or a piece of the ship itself. For months, it sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, an unassuming relic among grander treasures. And then, a crack appeared. The corroded tomb of bronze split open, revealing something that had no right to be there. Not in a shipwreck from the time of Julius Caesar. Inside
was a complex assembly of interlocking gears. Wheels of bronze so intricate, so precise, they looked like the innards of a modern clock. This was the first glimpse of the Antikythera mechanism. For decades, the artifact remained a deep enigma. But with the advent of advanced 21st century imaging technology, high-resolution X-ray tomography, and surface scanning, we have finally been able to peer through the corrosion and digitally reconstruct this astonishing device. The mainstream academic view is now settled, and it is in itself remarkable. The Antikythera mechanism is a highly sophisticated, hand-powered astronomical calculator. It was a portable, mechanical cosmos. By turning a single crank, its user could track the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and the 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. It didn't just track them, it modeled their complex movements through the sky.
The device accurately predicted solar and lunar eclipses down to the exact hour, using the Babylonian Saros cycle. It accounted for the elliptical orbit of the Moon, using a clever pin and slot mechanism that varied its speed, a brilliant solution to a problem that would vex astronomers for centuries. It even had a dial that tracked the calendar of ancient Pan-Hellenic games, including the Olympiad. Scholars confidently date its construction to the 2nd century BC and attribute it to the genius of Greek astronomers, perhaps even linked to the legendary Archimedes, who Cicero wrote had constructed similar such devices. In this view, the mechanism is the pinnacle of Greek scientific achievement, the absolute apex of their known capabilities. It is presented as a magnificent yet understandable product of its time. But this is where the neat and tidy explanation begins to unravel. To accept the mechanism as merely the pinnacle of Greek technology is to ignore a series of deeply unsettling questions that challenge the very foundation of our understanding of the ancient world. The problem is not what the device is. The problem is that it should not exist. Let us begin with the complexity. The complete reconstructed mechanism contains over 30 precision-cut bronze gears. The teeth on these gears are tiny, just over 1 millimeter long, and cut in perfect equilateral triangles. The level of craftsmanship and knowledge of mechanics required to design and build such a system is staggering. It is a level of horological and mechanical engineering that, according to our established timeline of history, would not be seen again on this planet until the great astronomical clocks of 14th century Europe, a full 1,500 years later. This is not a small discrepancy. It is a technological gap of 1.5 millennia. Then there is the issue of the differential gear. Hidden deep within the device's architecture, modern scans revealed a planetary gear train so advanced it has been identified as a differential. This is the kind of sophisticated gearing that allows a car's wheels to spin at different speeds when turning a corner. It is a fundamental component of modern mechanical engineering, and its invention is officially credited to the late 16th century. Yet, here it is, quietly doing its work in a Greek device from before the birth of Christ. How is this possible? Where did this knowledge come from? And more importantly, where did it go? This leads to the most profound anomaly of all. The mechanism is a technological orphan. An artifact of this complexity cannot simply spring into existence from nothing. It requires a long history of development, a tradition of science and engineering, of trial and error, of lesser prototypes and simpler models. A car cannot be invented without the prior invention of the wheel, the axle, and the engine. Yet, in the archaeological record, the Antikythera mechanism stands utterly alone. There are no known predecessors. There are no known successors. There are no other devices from the ancient world that come even remotely close to its level of mechanical sophistication. The entire technological tradition that must have existed to create it is missing. It is as if someone dropped a modern laptop into the court of a medieval king. It is an artifact without a history, without a lineage. It is a ghost.
Faced with this gaping void in our historical record, we are forced to look beyond the mainstream explanation. If the device was not a one-off miracle of a known tradition, then what was it?
One theory proposes the existence of a singular, unrecorded genius, an ancient Leonardo da Vinci whose brilliance far surpassed that of his contemporaries. Perhaps this lone mind conceived of and built this masterpiece in isolation. But even a genius needs the tools and manufacturing knowledge to execute their vision. The precision cutting of the gears, the advanced metallurgy of the bronze alloys, this speaks not of a single person, but of an established industry, an infrastructure of knowledge that has vanished without a trace. This leads to a more compelling and far more profound alternative. What if the Antikythera mechanism is not an anomaly at all? What if it is instead the sole survivor, the last testament of a widespread technological tradition that has been almost completely erased from the pages of history? We know that countless texts and secrets were lost in the burning of great libraries like that of Alexandria. Is it possible that detailed schematics for building such devices, the blueprints of an entire field of mechanical science, were lost in those flames? Perhaps these intricate astronomical calculators were not so rare in their time. Perhaps they were known to the educated elite of the Hellenistic world, only to have that knowledge and every single example of their work, save one, be consumed by the chaos of the collapsing Roman Empire. The mechanism, then, becomes a symbol of a forgotten golden age of science, a reminder of a technological height that humanity reached and then tragically lost, spending the next 1,500 years struggling to climb back to where it had already been. This device is a profound disconnect in our timeline. It is a whisper of a different past, one where the scientific revolution might have begun 1,000 years ahead of schedule. It represents a level of genius, of mechanical and astronomical understanding that we simply do not account for in our models of the ancient world. It is the ghost in the machine of history itself. It forces us to ask one of the most important questions in the study of our past. What else have we lost? What other heights of knowledge and engineering were reached by these forgotten masters? The Antikythera mechanism proves a stunning mastery over the micro, the delicate and intricate world of gears and celestial cycles. But what if this same impossible precision, this same forgotten science, was also applied to the macro? What happens when the mystery is not a small bronze device that can be held in the hand, but a fortress of stone, so massive its very construction defies the known laws of physics and engineering? High in the Peruvian Andes, where the air is thin and the boundary between earth and sky seems to dissolve, lies a monument that defies explanation. It is a place of silent, titanic power, a fortress that guards the ancient Inca capital of Cusco. But this is no ordinary citadel. This is Sacsayhuaman. Its name is said to mean satisfied falcon in the Quechua language, but satisfaction is the last thing a curious mind feels here. Instead, you are confronted by a profound and unsettling sense of impossibility. 3 massive tiered walls run in a zigzag pattern for nearly 1,000 feet, built from stones so colossal they seem to belong to a race of giants. The scale is breathtaking, a testament to raw ambition. But it isn't the size alone that captures the imagination. It is the perfection. The stones are not simple bricks, squared off and stacked. They are complex, polygonal behemoths of diorite and andesite, some with as many as 12 angles. Each one is unique, yet they interlock with a seamless, mortarless precision that is nothing short of miraculous. There are no gaps. A sheet of paper, a razor blade cannot be forced between them.
Standing before these walls, you are not just looking at a structure, you are staring into the face of a forgotten science, an art of engineering that, by all accounts, should not exist. Mainstream archaeology and history provide us with a neat, tidy explanation for this Andean marvel. The official narrative credits the construction of Sacsayhuaman to the Inca Empire, specifically during the reign of the great emperor Pachacuti, who began the project around 1438 AD. His successors continued the work, a colossal undertaking that supposedly employed more than 20,000 men over a period of 50 to 70 years. According to this view, Sacsayhuaman was the spiritual and military bastion of Cusco. The zigzag walls, it is said, represent the teeth of the puma, a sacred animal, as the city of Cusco itself was designed in the shape of this powerful feline. The accepted theory of its construction is a story of brute force, human ingenuity, and immense patience.
Archaeologists suggest the Inca used stone tools, harder river cobbles, to slowly pound and abrade the softer limestone and andesite blocks into shape. For quarrying, the method was rudimentary but effective. They would find natural fracture lines in the rock, drill holes with primitive tools, insert wooden wedges, and then soak them with water. As the wood expanded, the rock would split. To transport these monumental stones, some from quarries over 20 miles away, they are said to have used nothing more than thousands of men, llamas, logs for rolling, and massive ropes made of llama or alpaca fiber, pulling the blocks up earthen ramps. It is a story of a powerful empire marshaling its greatest resource, its people, to achieve the impossible. A compelling narrative, and for many, it is where the story ends. But it is also where the real mystery begins. Because when you look closer, when you truly analyze the physical evidence left behind in the stone, the mainstream explanation begins to fray, unraveling into a series of deeply problematic and unanswered questions. Let us first consider the sheer scale. The largest of the stones at Sacsayhuaman is estimated to weigh between 120 and 200 tons. To put that into perspective, that is the equivalent of about 100 modern cars fused into a single monolithic block. The official theory asks us to believe that 20,000 men at an altitude of 12,000 feet where oxygen is scarce dragged this weight for miles over uneven mountainous terrain using only ropes and logs. Modern engineers, with all their knowledge of physics and logistics, have stated that replicating this feat today would be a monumental challenge, requiring fleets of heavy-lift cranes and specialized transport vehicles. Could it be done with sheer manpower? Perhaps, but the logistics of coordinating thousands of people in such a task without a single catastrophic failure strains credulity. The margin for error would be zero. Then we come to the most baffling element of all, the precision. The idea that these airtight, multi-angle joints were achieved by simply pounding rocks together is where the conventional theory truly breaks down. Andesite is a hard, volcanic rock. Pounding two such stones together does not result in a perfect, seamless fit. It results in dust, rubble, and shattered edges. Yet the corners of the stones at Sacsayhuaman are crisp and sharp, the surfaces smooth and perfectly mated to their neighbors. How was this level of precision accomplished on an industrial, megalithic scale? Furthermore, some of the stones show evidence of what can only be described as vitrification. Their surfaces are smooth, almost glassy, as if the rock itself was subjected to an intense heat that melted and fused its outer layer. This is not a characteristic of percussive tooling. It is a hallmark of advanced thermal technology, something entirely absent from the accepted toolkit of the 15th century Inca. This leads to an even more provocative observation.
Dotted throughout Cusco and the Sacred Valley, one can clearly see two distinct styles of stonework. The first is unequivocally Incan, smaller, rougher stones held together with clay mortar. It is impressive, but clearly the work of human hands with simple tools. But underneath this work, often serving as the foundation for Incan buildings, you find it, the impossible megalithic style of Sacsayhuaman, older, larger, and infinitely more sophisticated. This evidence strongly suggests that the Inca did not build the most incredible parts of Sacsayhuaman. They found them. They discovered the ruins of a much older, far more advanced civilization and built their own empire upon its foundations. They were not the master architects of these megaliths. They were merely the inheritors. If the Inca did not build Sacsayhuaman, then who did? To answer this, we must step outside the comfortable confines of mainstream history and into the realm of speculative, yet compelling, alternative theories. One of the most persistent legends in the region speaks of a lost technology known only to the gods. Local lore, passed down through generations, claims the ancient builders possessed knowledge of a particular plant whose acidic juices could soften stone, making it as malleable as clay. According to these stories, the builders would coat the massive blocks with this substance, allowing them to be perfectly molded and fitted into place before they hardened again. While no such plant has ever been definitively identified, it presents an elegant solution to the problem of precision.
Another, more technological theory points towards acoustics. Some researchers have proposed that the builders had mastered a form of sonic engineering or acoustic levitation. The idea is that by generating a precise sound frequency, they could nullify the effects of gravity, allowing them to lift and maneuver these 200-ton blocks as if they were weightless. It sounds like science fiction, but it addresses the dual problem of transportation and placement with one incredible, forgotten technology. A third possibility is perhaps the most revolutionary. What if the stones were not carved and lifted at all? What if they were cast? Proponents of geopolymer theory suggest that the builders did not quarry solid rock, but rather created it. They may have possessed a lost recipe for a highly advanced concrete using crushed local rock and a chemical binder, which they then poured into molds on site. This would explain everything: the perfect fits, the bizarre shapes, the lack of tool marks, and the sheer scale of the operation. The builders were not just stonemasons, they were master chemists. Sacsayhuaman does not exist in a vacuum. Its impossible stonework is part of a global pattern of ancient megalithic anomalies. From the H-blocks of Puma Punku in nearby Bolivia, cut with modern-day precision, to the 1,000-ton foundation stones at Baalbek in Lebanon, the evidence is scattered across the planet. Each site on its own is a profound mystery, but when viewed together, they begin to paint a picture of a lost chapter of human history. They hint at a global interconnected civilization that existed in the deep past, a culture that possessed a scientific understanding far beyond our own until very recently. Sacsayhuaman may not just be an Inca fortress. It may be one of the last and greatest surviving relics of this forgotten epic, a silent testament to a level of knowledge and power that was wiped from the face of the earth by some unknown cataclysm. So we are left standing before these silent, colossal stones, confronted by a choice. Do we accept the simple story of brute force and primitive tools despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary? Or do we dare to consider that our history is far more complex and mysterious than we have ever imagined? The stones of Sacsayhuaman do not offer up their secrets easily.
They demand that we ask the difficult questions and acknowledge that the true identity of their builders remains one of the greatest and most profound enigmas of the ancient world. They stand as a powerful reminder that not all of history's puzzles have been solved. And elsewhere, hidden away in dusty archives and forgotten collections, another riddle, written not in stone, but on parchment, has defied the world's greatest minds for centuries, waiting for its secrets to be unlocked.
It sits in quiet solitude within the climate-controlled vaults of Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. It is not the largest book on the shelves, nor the most lavishly decorated. To the casual eye, it is an unassuming medieval codex, just over 200 pages of weathered vellum, bound in a simple, unadorned cover. But to touch this book is to touch the edge of an intellectual abyss. Its official designation is MS 408, but the world knows it by another name, a name that has become synonymous with unbreakable codes and unsolvable mysteries. It is called the Voynich manuscript. To open its pages is to step into another reality. On every leaf, a flowing, elegant script dances across the vellum. The letters are composed of graceful curves and precise, confident strokes, forming words and sentences that seem to hold profound meaning. But it is a meaning that has been utterly lost to time. Not a single word is recognizable. It is a language that no one on earth can read. And stranger still are the illustrations, drawn with a delicate hand and colored with faded, earthen pigments. Page after page reveals a world that is hauntingly familiar, yet fundamentally alien. There are botanical drawings of plants, but they are chimeras, hybrids of root, leaf, and flower that exist nowhere in nature. There are astronomical charts of celestial bodies, but they depict zodiacs and constellations that have never graced our night sky. And then there is the most baffling section of all, intricate diagrams of small, naked figures bathing and languidly floating in pools of strange green and blue fluid, all connected by a network of bizarre, organ-like plumbing. They are images without precedent, without any known parallel in the entire history of human art or science. For over a century, this book has been a siren's call to the world's greatest minds. It is a locked room puzzle crafted from ink and parchment, a message in a bottle from a forgotten shore, and it guards its secrets perfectly. The known history of the manuscript is itself a trail of whispers and shadows. It surfaces definitively in 1912 when a Polish-American antique book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich discovered it in a collection of manuscripts held at a Jesuit college near Rome. Voynich became obsessed, dedicating the rest of his life to unlocking its meaning, but he would die without ever deciphering a single character. Modern science, at least, has answered one crucial question. Through rigorous radiocarbon dating, the vellum pages have been traced back to the early 14th century, sometime between 1404 and 1438. The ink and paints, analyzed with spectroscopic technology, are consistent with materials commonly used in that period. This is no modern forgery. The book is an authentic, 600-year-old artifact. Its path through history is faint but tantalizing. A letter found tucked within its pages suggests it once belonged to the court of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a man fascinated by alchemy, astrology, and the occult. From there it seems to have passed through the hands of alchemists and scholars, each one presumably trying and failing to unlock the wisdom held within. The mainstream academic view, therefore, is a carefully worded admission of defeat.
It is likely an early herbal or medical text, a pharmacopoeia detailing the secrets of plants and their uses. Or perhaps it is an alchemical treatise, its bizarre imagery a symbolic language for esoteric processes. The consensus is that it is a real document from the late Middle Ages, but one whose language and context are so obscure its meaning may be permanently lost. It is treated as an outlier, a historical curiosity, a dead end. But it is here, at this comfortable conclusion, that the mystery truly begins. Because the deeper one looks into the Voynich manuscript, the more it defies every simple explanation. It is not just an unreadable book, it is an impossibly unreadable book. The first and most enduring challenge is the script itself. If it were meaningless gibberish, a madman scrawling, it would be random. But the Voynich script is anything but. It demonstrates a clear and unwavering structure. Certain characters appear more often than others. Some letters prefer to be at the beginnings of words, others at the end. The patterns are consistent, and they are repeated throughout the entire 240-page text. In the 1940s, leading cryptographers applied a powerful linguistic tool called word frequency analysis. They discovered that the manuscript's text adheres perfectly to something called Zipf's law, a statistical rule that all known human languages follow. The law states that the most frequent word will appear about twice as often as the second most frequent word, 3 times as often as the third, and so on. The Voynich text follows this law precisely. It behaves like a real functional language. Furthermore, the text's entropy, a measure of its orderliness and predictability, is similar to that of languages like Latin or English. The writing flows from left to right with a steady, confident hand. There are no corrections. It's as if the author was writing fluently, transcribing a language they knew intimately. This is not the work of someone randomly generating symbols. This is the product of a deliberate, intelligent mind. And it is this intelligence that makes the illustrations so deeply unsettling. The botanical drawings are not crude sketches. They are rendered with the detail and precision of a scientific observer. Roots are shown with soil still clinging to them. Leaves are depicted in various stages of growth, and cross-sections reveal intricate internal structures. The artist knew exactly what they were drawing. The problem is, we don't. Not a single plant has ever been definitively identified. They are phantoms, biological impossibilities drawn with scientific realism. The astronomical section is no different. We see what appear to be suns, moons, and stars arranged in circular diagrams. Yet the symbols for the zodiac are distorted, with extra figures and unrecognizable arrangements. One fold-out page contains a stunning circular map, a rosette of interconnected diagrams that some have speculated could be a map of a galaxy, or perhaps a depiction of cellular biology seen through a microscope, centuries before the microscope was even invented. This is the central paradox of the Voynich manuscript. It displays all the hallmarks of a structured, logical, and meaningful document, yet its content describes a world that is utterly alien. It is a scientific textbook for a science we do not recognize, an herbal guide for a planet we have never visited. The world's most brilliant minds have thrown themselves against this wall of silence. During the Cold War, cryptanalysts from the NSA, armed with the most advanced techniques of their day, attempted to crack it, believing it might be a hidden message. They failed. In the modern era, data scientists have unleashed powerful AI algorithms and machine learning models on the text, hoping to find a pattern that human eyes have missed. They too have failed. If this is a code, it is the most ingenious and successful cipher in human history, a cryptographic masterpiece conceived 600 years ago that remains unbroken by 21st century technology. Faced with this impossible object, researchers have been forced to explore theories that stretch the boundaries of our known history. Each one attempts to explain the enigma, but each one opens up a new set of bewildering questions. One of the oldest theories is that the manuscript is simply an elaborate and brilliant hoax, not a modern one, but a 15th century deception, perhaps created to swindle the wealthy patron like Emperor Rudolph. The problem with this theory is the sheer, mind-boggling complexity required. To invent an entire language from scratch that flawlessly mimics the statistical properties of real languages is a feat of genius in itself. Why would a common forger go to such extraordinary, intellectually demanding lengths for a payoff that was far from guaranteed? The effort involved seems vastly disproportionate to the potential reward. A second, more intriguing theory posits that the script is not a code, but a lost or undiscovered language. Perhaps it is the last surviving text of a forgotten European or Asian culture, its people and memory now erased from the world. Or more esoterically, that it represents a form of glossolalia, the theological term for speaking in tongues. It could be a channeled text, a message from a divine or spiritual source, transcribed by a mystic in a state of trance. Yet the document's systematic organization, with its clearly delineated sections for botany, astronomy, and biology, suggests a structured, intellectual purpose, not a chaotic, ecstatic outburst. This leads to the most persistent theory, that the manuscript is, in fact, an unbreakable cipher. The 15th century was a time of burgeoning interest in cryptography. Perhaps the text is a known language like Latin or medieval German that has been obscured using a complex, multi-layered encryption method. Some have proposed a polyalphabetic cipher where letters change their meaning based on their position. Others suggest a Cardano grill, where a template is laid over the page to reveal a hidden message. But no proposed key, no deciphering technique has ever produced more than a few random, tantalizing words. The author would have to have been a cryptographic pioneer living centuries ahead of his time. Faced with this impossible object, researchers have been forced to explore theories that stretch the boundaries of our known history. Each one attempts to explain the enigma, but each one opens up a new set of bewildering questions. One of the oldest theories is that the manuscript is simply an elaborate and brilliant hoax, not a modern one, but a 15th century deception, perhaps created to swindle the wealthy patron like Emperor Rudolph. The problem with this theory is the sheer, mind-boggling complexity required. To invent an entire language from scratch that flawlessly mimics the statistical properties of real languages is a feat of genius in itself. Why would a common forger go to such extraordinary, intellectually demanding lengths for a payoff that was far from guaranteed? The effort involved seems vastly disproportionate to the potential reward. A second, more intriguing theory posits that the script is not a code, but a lost or undiscovered language. Perhaps it is the last surviving text of a forgotten European or Asian culture, its people and memory now erased from the world. Or, more esoterically, that it represents a form of glossolalia, the theological term for speaking in tongues. It could be a channeled text, a message from a divine or spiritual source, transcribed by a mystic in a state of trance. Yet the document's systematic organization, with its clearly delineated sections for botany, astronomy, and biology, suggests a structured intellectual purpose, not a chaotic, ecstatic outburst. This leads to the most persistent theory, that the manuscript is, in fact, an unbreakable cipher. The 15th century was a time of burgeoning interest in cryptography. Perhaps the text is a known language like Latin or medieval German that has been obscured using a complex, multi-layered encryption method. Some have proposed a polyalphabetic cipher, where letters change their meaning based on their position. Others suggest a Cardano grill,
This is why the Voynich manuscript is so much more than a historical puzzle. It is a ghost in our library, a testament to the fact that entire streams of human knowledge can exist, flourish, and then vanish from the earth, leaving behind only a single, inscrutable artifact. It proves that the world of our ancestors was not a simpler place. It was a world that contained minds, capable of creating systems of thought so divergent, so unique, that they have become completely unintelligible to us today. The book is evidence of a forgotten science, a lost philosophy, or the singular vision of a lonely genius whose intellectual world was entirely his own. It is a fragment of a lost branch of the human story, a page from a book we never knew was written. And so, it sits in its vault at Yale, silent and patient. We can analyze its vellum, date its ink, and digitize its pages in stunning high resolution. We can subject its text to the full force of our computational power. We possess the book's body, but its soul remains forever out of reach. What profound knowledge lies dormant within these pages? Is it a collection of forgotten herbal remedies that could revolutionize modern medicine? Is it the arcane cosmological secrets of a medieval mystic? Or is the ultimate secret that there is no secret at all, and the book is simply a beautiful, meaningless work of art designed to ensnare the minds of all who gaze upon it? The Voynich manuscript is a perfect mystery, an echo from a past we can no longer comprehend. It is a puzzle box made of paper and ink, whose true nature continues to elude us. But while some mysteries are confined to the pages of a book, others are etched into the very surface of the earth, on a scale so vast and bewildering, they seem intended not for the eyes of man, but for the eyes of the gods themselves. In the arid, sun-scorched plains of southern Peru, the earth itself has been turned into a canvas, a silent, sprawling art gallery that stretches for nearly 200 square miles. This is the Nazca Plateau, one of the driest places on the planet. Here, etched into the desert floor for millennia, are a series of engravings so vast they defy human scale, so enigmatic they challenge the very foundations of archaeology. They are the Nazca Lines. From the ground, they are nothing. Faint impressions in the soil, shallow channels winding aimlessly through the reddish-brown desert pavement. One could walk directly across one of the planet's greatest works of art and be completely unaware of its existence. But climb into the sky, rise several hundred feet into the thin, dry air, and the meaningless lines converge into forms of breathtaking clarity and scale. Suddenly, a perfect hummingbird, over 300 feet long, appears frozen in mid-flight. Nearby, a spider, meticulously rendered with 8 legs and spinneret, is so biologically accurate
that scientists have identified it as a specific species from the Amazon rainforest, hundreds of miles away. Elsewhere, a condor with a 440-foot wingspan spreads its wings as if to greet the sky. A monkey with a distinctively coiled tail sprawls across the landscape. These are the famous geoglyphs, but they are only the beginning. Interspersed with these biomorphs are hundreds of other figures. Perfectly straight lines, some running for miles with unfathomable precision, crisscross the plateau. Enormous geometric shapes, trapezoids, rectangles, and spirals are carved into the earth with a draftsman's accuracy. It is a sprawling, silent testament, an epic message written in a language we have lost the key to understanding. Created by the Nazca culture sometime between 500 BCE and 500 CE, these lines were made by a deceptively simple process, clearing away the 15-centimeter layer of rust-colored iron oxide-coated pebbles to reveal the lighter, yellowish-gray soil beneath. In this hyper-arid climate, with little rain or wind, these shallow etchings have been preserved for nearly 2,000 years, waiting. So, what is the accepted explanation for this monumental undertaking? For decades, mainstream archaeology has proposed a grounded, ritualistic purpose for the lines. The dominant theory suggests they were ceremonial pathways, created to be walked upon during religious processions. Archaeologists posit that different family clans or groups were responsible for creating and maintaining specific glyphs. These pathways, they argue, were tied to rituals appealing to the gods for the most precious resource in this desolate land, water. Many of the lines appear to point towards the Andes Mountains, the source of the rivers that feed the region. The theory is that the Nazca people, in a desperate act of faith, would walk these sacred lines, performing rituals to ensure the continued flow of water that sustained their civilization. The animal figures themselves are thought to be spiritual symbols, representations of powerful entities in the Nazca cosmology, perhaps residing in the sky, the earth, or the underworld. The construction, while vast, is seen as achievable. Using simple tools and rudimentary surveying techniques, such as wooden stakes and lengths of rope, small teams could have laid out the designs over time. The remarkable straightness of the long lines, according to this view, could have been achieved by sighting between two distant points. In essence, the mainstream view presents the Nazca lines as a massive open-air temple, a testament to the Nazca people's deep connection with their environment and their gods, intended for ceremony, not for observation from above. It is a plausible, earthbound explanation for a people living on the edge of survival. But this is where the mystery deepens. The moment you begin to scrutinize this explanation, unsettling questions emerge that the theory of ceremonial pathways struggles to answer. The first and most profound challenge is the paradox of perspective. Why would a culture invest generations of labor to create hundreds of images, the largest of which are over 1,200 feet long, that they themselves could never see? The full form of these glyphs is utterly incomprehensible from the ground. To truly appreciate the hummingbird or the spider, you must be airborne. Did the Nazca people toil for centuries to create a masterpiece for an audience that didn't exist? It is an artistic and engineering endeavor that seems to completely defy the limitations of its creators.
Then there is the issue of precision. While simple stakes and ropes can create straight lines, the Nazca artists achieved a level of accuracy over immense distances that is baffling. Some lines run arrow straight for over 5 miles, deviating by only a few yards. The complex curves of the animal figures are rendered with a fluid, artistic confidence that seems impossible to achieve when your canvas is a mile wide and you cannot see the whole picture. How did they maintain such perfect proportions without an aerial viewpoint for reference? Furthermore, The very nature of many glyphs contradicts the idea of them being processional walkways. Many of the most famous animal figures, like the monkey and the spider, are composed of a single, continuous line that never intersects itself. To walk it as a pathway would be a confusing, nonsensical journey with no clear beginning or end. It behaves more like a singular, deliberate stroke of a pen than a ritualistic labyrinth. And what of the giant geometric shapes? The enormous trapezoids, some thousands of feet long, look less like ceremonial spaces and more like runways. They are cleared, flattened areas of desert that seem to serve a completely different, more functional purpose than the intricate animal figures they sit alongside. The mainstream view, while logical on the surface, begins to feel inadequate, a small answer for a very, very big question. It accounts for the how, but it utterly fails to explain the why. It is in this void of explanation that more speculative and perhaps more compelling theories are born. The most famous and dedicated researcher of the lines was the German mathematician Maria Riesch. For over half a century, she lived in the desert, meticulously mapping, cleaning, and measuring the glyphs. Riesch became convinced that the plateau was not a temple, but a colossal astronomical observatory. She proposed that the lines were a celestial calendar, aligning with the rising and setting of the sun, the moon, and key stars during solstices and equinoxes. The animal figures, she believed, might represent ancient constellations. While some of her proposed alignments have been verified, subsequent statistical analysis has shown that the number of astronomical correlations is not much greater than what would be expected by pure chance. The Nazca lines are not a precise celestial map, at least one we cannot currently read. Yet her work opened the door to thinking about the lines in a new way, not as something to be walked upon, but as something to be read, a message directed outwards and upwards. This upward-facing direction led to the most controversial theory of all, popularized in the 1960s by author Erich von Däniken. He looked at the giant trapezoids that resemble airstrips, the incredible precision, and the skyward orientation of the art, and asked a radical question. What if the intended audience was not on the ground and not of this world? Von Däniken proposed that the Nazca lines were either by or for ancient astronauts, extraterrestrial visitors who came to Earth in antiquity. The long, straight lines, he argued, could have been landing strips for their spacecraft. The animal figures might have been attempts by the Nazca people to replicate the gods they saw descend from the heavens, or perhaps they were navigation markers for those same gods to use on their return. To the academic world, this is pure pseudoscience, but the theory's enduring power lies in its ability to solve the central paradox. It provides a reason for the aerial perspective. It explains why a culture would create art for the sky. While there is no direct evidence to support this claim, the sheer inadequacy of other explanations keeps the ancient astronaut theory alive in the public imagination. It is an extraordinary claim, born from an equally extraordinary mystery. It forces us to confront the possibility that the answer to the Nazca puzzle is not just unconventional, but is something far outside the bounds of our known history. The Nazca lines do not exist in a vacuum. They are part of a global pattern of ancient enigmas that hint at lost capabilities. The engineering precision required to create them echoes the impossible stonework of the Andes, the mathematical genius encoded in the pyramids, and the anachronistic technology of the Antikythera mechanism. Each is a data point suggesting that ancient cultures may have possessed a different kind of knowledge, a different understanding of science and cosmology than we give them credit for. The mystery of Nazca is not just about who created the lines or why. It's about how. How did they achieve this scale and precision? Was it through a lost form of mathematics, a forgotten surveying technique, or something more?
The true purpose of these immense etchings may be lost to the sands of time, a secret the Nazca people took with them to their graves. But the figures remain. They are a silent challenge, a question written across the face of the earth itself. They force us to wonder what other messages, what other monumental feats might be hiding in plain sight, their meaning just beyond our grasp. The Nazca Plateau proves that humanity has long been obsessed with the heavens, with reaching out to something beyond our terrestrial home. But while these figures were designed to be seen from above, what happens when the greatest mysteries are not etched upon the surface for the sky to see, but are buried deep beneath it, hidden from sight entirely?
In the quiet hills of Zhongjiang Province, China, there is a small village named Xianbai. For generations, its people lived alongside a series of curious ponds that the locals claimed were bottomless. They were strangely deep, rectangular, and teeming with fish that were remarkably easy to catch. For centuries, they were simply a feature of the landscape, their true nature a subject of village folklore and little else. But in 1992, one farmer, a man named Wu Anai, let his curiosity get the better of him. Driven by a simple, practical idea that these so-called bottomless ponds must have a bottom, and that draining one would yield a bounty of fish, he gathered his neighbors. They bought a water pump, and on a fateful day in June, they switched it on, plunging the hose into the murky depths. For 17 days and nights, the pump roared, drawing out thousands upon thousands of cubic meters of water. The villagers watched, waiting for the water level to drop, for the pond to reveal its muddy floor. But what it revealed was not of this world. As the water receded, it did not expose mud and rock. It unveiled a stark, straight, man-made wall descending into a colossal darkness. It uncovered a precisely carved entrance, the gateway to an entire world that had been swallowed by the earth and drowned in time. They hadn't drained a pond. They had emptied the antechamber of a lost subterranean kingdom. This was the first of the Longyu grottos. What lay within stunned the archaeologists who were soon called to the site. A vast, cavernous space, larger than a football field, carved entirely from solid siltstone. The ceiling, held aloft by enormous tapered rock pillars, angled down at a perfect 60-degree slope. And every single surface, the walls, the ceiling, the pillars, was covered in a uniform pattern of chisel marks, a series of parallel lines etched with an inexplicable artistry. This was not just one cave. Further investigation revealed a complex of at least 24 such grottos, all exhibiting the same impossible scale and craftsmanship. A silent underground metropolis with a total excavated volume of nearly 1 million cubic meters. Carbon dating of artifacts found nearby placed their creation around 2,000 years ago, during the reign of China's first emperor Qin Shi Huang, a ruler known for his monumental ambition. Faced with this evidence, the mainstream archaeological community settled on the most logical and, frankly, the only plausible explanation they could muster. The Longyu grottos were simply an ancient quarry, a massive project to excavate stone for the building of the new empire. The Qin dynasty needed vast quantities of material for their palaces, their cities, and their Great Wall. What better explanation for such a massive removal of rock? It's a clean, simple theory that places the grottos firmly within the known capabilities and needs of the era. It answers the question of the missing stone by stating that we are standing inside the hole it left behind. It's a practical solution to a seemingly fantastic discovery. But as you descend into the cold, silent darkness of Longyu, the louder the unanswered questions become, and the simple theory of a quarry
begins to disintegrate under the weight of its own impossibility.
Perhaps the most profound silence at Longyu, however, comes from what isn't there. For a project that would have required thousands of laborers working for decades, a project that removed almost 1 million cubic meters of rock, not a single tool has ever been found. Not one pickaxe, not one chisel, not one hammer. Furthermore, there is no evidence of the workers themselves, no pottery, no bones, no discarded equipment. There is no soot on the ceilings from the torches or lamps that would have been required to light the oppressive darkness. It is as if an army of ghosts carved out a kingdom and then vanished without a trace, taking all of their secrets with them. But the greatest mystery, the one that elevates the Longyu grottos from a mere puzzle to a profound historical paradox, is their complete and total absence from the historical record. The Qin and subsequent Han dynasties were meticulous record keepers. They documented everything: imperial decrees, grand construction projects, military campaigns, even poetry. The construction of the Great Wall is detailed. The creation of the Terracotta Army is known. Yet this project, a feat of engineering on a comparable scale, is mentioned nowhere. No official document, no local history, no passing mention in a traveler's diary. It is a historical phantom, an endeavor of immense scale and cost involving a generation of laborers, was undertaken and completed in absolute secrecy, and then it was completely and utterly forgotten. Erased from history so perfectly that its existence was unknown until a farmer switched on a water pump. If it wasn't a quarry, then what was it? The truth is, nobody knows. Each alternative theory only raises more questions. Some propose it was a secret military base or a hidden palace for an emperor. This would explain the secrecy and the high quality of the work, but a palace with no living quarters? A base with no strategic value? And again, why would it be abandoned, flooded, and then wiped from the memory of the very dynasty that built it? Others suggest a religious or ceremonial purpose, that these were vast underground temples. The scale certainly feels spiritual, the pillars like the columns of a dark stone cathedral. A few simple carvings have been found: a horse, a bird, a fish, which could be symbolic. But for a complex of this size, the iconography is almost non-existent. What rituals would demand such a space and a faith so powerful it could command this level of devotion, only to vanish without leaving any other trace of its existence? More fringe theories point to the stars, suggesting the layout of 7 of the caves mimics the constellation of the Big Dipper, hinting at an unknown astronomical purpose. But perhaps the most tantalizing theory is also the most disturbing, that the grottos were not built by the Qin dynasty at all, that they are far older, the legacy of a culture so ancient its memory has been scoured from the earth, a culture with the knowledge and means to undertake such a project whose only remaining signature is this impossible, silent kingdom beneath the hills of Zhejiang. The Longyu grottos do not exist in isolation. They are part of a global pattern of inexplicable ancient engineering, of monumental structures whose creation defies the accepted narrative of our past. They force us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that our history is not a complete story. It may be a heavily redacted document with entire chapters, entire civilizations missing. The grottos are a monument not to a forgotten emperor, but to a forgotten chapter of the human story. A chapter that speaks of a time when we or someone could achieve the impossible in stone. Ultimately, we are left staring into a void. We have the what, a breathtaking subterranean world, but we have no who, no how, and most importantly, no why. the builders of Longyu left us with a masterpiece of engineering and a perfect, impenetrable silence. This silence is a testament to history's most terrifying power, the power to forget. It leaves us to wonder, if a project of this magnitude can vanish so completely from our collective memory, what other wonders, what other truths lie just beneath our feet, waiting for one curious soul to start digging? For some mysteries are not carved in stone. They are written in a language that, to this day, no one can read.
Our journey is at its end, but the true mystery is just beginning. We have walked through subterranean kingdoms carved from impossible rock and stared at pages from a book that no mind can decipher. We have stood before temples that predate history itself and held the ghosts of impossible machines in our hands. Each discovery a defiant monolith standing against the simple story of our past. These are not mere historical curiosities. They are fundamental fractures in the very foundation of our accepted timeline. The neat, linear progression of humanity, from primitive hunter-gatherers to modern society, begins to crumble in the face of such anomalies. Each one is a persistent echo, a whisper from a time we are told never existed. They suggest that the human story is not a straight line, but a vast and tangled tapestry with entire sections torn away, leaving us to guess at the grandeur of the original image. Could it be that these are not isolated enigmas, but pieces of a single, coherent, and forgotten narrative? A story of humanity that contains lost chapters, forgotten heights of genius and capabilities that we are only now beginning to rediscover. Perhaps our ancestors were not simpler than us, but simply different, possessed of a different kind of knowledge, a different understanding of the universe, and a different destiny that was somehow lost to the sands of time. As we stare into the abyss of what we do not know, we must accept a humbling truth. The past is not a dead and settled country. It is a deeply foreign and enigmatic land whose borders we are only just beginning to map. The monoliths are silent, the books are sealed, and the machines are still, for now. The greatest question, then, is not what we have found, but what else remains, buried and waiting to be discovered.